I appreciate you. Welcome to the Mitchell Report Unleashed podcast, and I feel like we're gonna have a good conversation here.
Yeah, let's
All right,
go.
let's get right into it. You know what I like about podcasting is that we get these moments. Doesn't matter if it's virtual, in-person conversations, and some excellent dialogue. I feel like is gonna come out of this time and space. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, can you share a growth tactic that always works for folks in business?
So it, always is a tough word, but if I'm talking to somebody who's your basic entrepreneur, um, call it somewhere below $10 million, and it probably works for everybody, is that their price is usually wrong. And by wrong, I mean they could raise it and earn more money. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a product or a service. For service people, I mean, this is a really absolute kind of a statement. Most service people undercharge, and they undercharge. Jay Abraham is a friend of mine, and he told me a long time ago. He said people undercharge because they don't revere themselves, and it's his choice of words is revere, and it's really true. People they don't really understand what they're worth, so they undercharge. And they feel like if they charge more, they're going to lose money, not earn more money. And it's almost never true. You can raise your prices. And here's kind of an interesting thing to keep in mind. If you're selling a product, this is less relevant if you're selling a service. If you're selling a product, whatever your net margin is, and let's say the average net margin is 10%, whatever your net margin is, if you raise your price by that percentage, you double your profits. So in other words, if your net margin is 10% and you raise your prices by 10%, you double your profits. And that I tell that to audiences, and nobody believes me. Nobody gets like, how could that be true? How could that be true? And it's really simple, which is you sell a thing for $100 and you keep 10 of them, and you raise the price by $10 and you make it now it's $110 and you keep $20. Well, what'd you just do? You just doubled your prices. So, I mean, you doubled your profits. So that's kind of a go-to, and it works for almost anybody. And I've helped people make a lot of extra money just by doing that. And and what's cool about it is it's instantaneous. And if if you're not stupid, it doesn't cost you a thing. So it's really pretty amazing. And I've had a lot of people sit in workshops of mine where I tell them this stuff, and there's always somebody, and they're usually sitting way in the back of the room, and they're clicking away on their laptop. Click. And then at some point, like after I said what I said, they raise their hand and they say, I just got to tell you, I just raised the renewal rate on my membership program, blah, blah, blah. And people are still buying, like right then and there, people are still buying. And they're like, I think I just doubled the profits on my business, and this happens all the time. And there's always somebody, if not more than one, but there's always at least somebody who does that. So if you want the always go-to, that's the always go-to.
And that's very common, especially right now in business and coaching or whatever service you're offering in the world of the internet. And a lot of folks don't know their value. And you hit on something there. You know what I mean? You got to know your ability and know your worth, what you're delivering, what you're bringing to the folks out there. Everybody wants to be like either a content creator or a coach, but it's like if you don't believe in yourself, well, what are you going to start charging? And some people, and I want you to speak to this because I feel like some folks get into this mindset where they're like, I don't want to charge this much because people are not going to buy.
So I can speak to that really easily, which is that you raise your prices and people buy, and you raise the prices again and people buy, and then you raise your price and then they stop buying. So like, what do? Well, you lower it back. You bring it back down. At one point, I went past the place where people were spending easily. And I did it because I had these clients in Panama who, I don't remember what the exact circumstances were, but they were paying me a lot of money. And I decided that should be my rate. And so I raised my rates to that, and nobody else would pay it. And I was like, well, okay, the solution to this is obvious, which is roll it back. And you roll it back. Here's the thing. Nobody knows what their real price should be. It's just, you don't even know. So, well, how do you come to where it should be? This is a sales tip. And a lot of people don't always do this. And if you always do it, you can always charge more, which is that how do you get the client to realize what the value is? And the simplest way to do it is by asking them. If you tell somebody what your worth is, they can choose to believe you or not. And if you're selling them something, then their typical choice is not to believe you. Because they go, well, he's a salesman. He's trying to sell me something. So, of course, he's telling me what he wants me to hear. And I don't necessarily have to believe that. The way I sell, when I sell something, I ask people, well, if we do what we just said we're going to do, what do you think that's going to be the impact on your business? So what's the standard answer?
The standard answer would be like, okay. Like I'll just kind of play the role play to be like, okay, well, give me more, like,
Tell me more, right? I don't know. That's what
Mhm.
they're going to say. They're going to say, I don't know. How do I know what it's going to be worth?
Exactly.
And I say, well, guess. And they guess. And whatever they guess, it doesn't matter. They just said it. It's true. So I work people through a process, and this is really legitimate for them, which is like, okay, we're going to do we just talked about doing A and B and C. If we do A, B, and C, what do you think is going to be the impact on your business? And they go, well, gee, I don't know. And I say, well, guess. And they go, well, I don't know. I say, well, guess harder. And so they guess something. That becomes the number. And if the number, I say, well, what's that going to be worth to you? And they say $500,000. If they're a $500,000 business, we just figured out how to double their business. And they say, well, it's going to be worth about $500,000. I said, well, do you think that would be worth you paying me X for? If we just figured out that this is probably going to be worth $500,000 to your business, and I'm charging you $95,000 for the year to get you there. I say, do you think that's worth $95,000? And they say, yeah, sure. That's how I just established my price. So this process works really well, which is, in general, I don't know, what am I worth? Am I worth $100,000 a year? Well, I think so, but the question is, do you think so? And if I don't ask you for $100,000, if I say, well, I'm worth $50,000, well, that was the price, right? There is no, I got this from a guy named, do you know Alan Weiss?
Never heard the name, no.
Okay, Alan Weiss is a guy who writes books about consulting. He's been he's not an entrepreneur. He doesn't consult with entrepreneurs. His business was consulting with big corporations. So I was talking with Alan one day, and he says to me, you're doing really great, but you're not charging enough. And I said, how do you know I'm not charging enough? And he said, well, number one, most people don't charge enough. He said, but number two, he said, you're really busy. And if you charged more, you might be a little less busy and make more money. And I'm like, well, where'd you get that from? And he had this, what he said to me was so arrogant. He said, well, here we were trying to get an appointment going to get ourselves into a conversation, and it was difficult to do, and it wasn't because of me. It must have been your fault. I'm like, wow, all right.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
Right. So I said, all right, well, I think I'm charging the most I can in my market. And he says to me, and it was the funniest thing, he says, duh, change your market. So I'm like, well, that's a cool idea. And in that moment, I doubled my income for that year.
Wow.
Because I literally I took what he said to heart, and I decided to double my prices. Yeah, and
When you
I just doubled them.
Yeah. So when you speak to that, because what's coming from you when I'm hearing you, and I'm playing off like my audience and things like that, is like they're hearing growth, right? For me, I'm also hearing growth, but scaling. So let's speak to that. Like, I feel like some folks in business now they get confused between what growth is and what scaling is. Explain the differences between the both.
Well, for me, I mean, it's an interesting thing because this word scaling only recently came into the entrepreneurial vocabulary, right? And now it's like all over the place. Everybody's talking about scaling. So to me, scalable means that when you grow your revenue, you're also growing your profit. So, like, it's easy to grow your revenue and kill your profits,
Okay.
right? But scaling to me means very specifically that you're growing and you're growing your profits as you grow. That's what it means. Because the thing is, it's like you can increase just about anything in your business, but it may cost you. And if it costs you more, if your costs are going up higher than your revenue's going up, you're not scaling the business. The word scaling has always meant to me, and I'm talking about forever, not the recent use of the word, but it's always meant scaling means you can grow the business and have the profits increase. It's not, people talk about profit versus profitability. And that's a really important distinction because profitability is the percentage of revenue that you get to keep, right? That's profitability. But profits are the money you get to keep. And I'm much more interested in the profits than anything else.
Of course. Aren't we all?
But people don't necessarily make those kind of distinctions. And I think that's if we're saying we're going to scale our business. I helped a dental client of mine scale to the point where he sold his business for $100 million.
Holy wow.
And that's scaling, right? We duplicated his offices and we figured out a duplication model that just worked every single time. And we were able to keep duplicating the businesses and keep getting more dentists to work for him. And every time we did it, it was profitable. And so the result was the revenues grew substantially and the profits grew substantially, and a private equity firm bought them for a whole batch of money, which wouldn't have happened had we grown the business but not improved the profits at the same time.
Love that you say that. So when you first got into this career, right? Because because before we hit the record button, you're in your 70s. You said you're in your 70s. So business now looks a lot different because you have that social media aspect to it. And those back in those days, it wasn't social media. It wasn't all
Right. No,
that
there
raw.
wasn't.
You know what I mean? So what is some things that you see that you bring from the old school to now to the new school?
So I built this business from scratch by doing what is now called content marketing.
Okay.
That's how I built the business. I got some advice and figured out that I needed to get good at writing and I needed to get good at speaking, right? Which were two things that I was fairly terrible at when I started. But by writing and speaking, I was creating content. I have 3 published books. I have hundreds of articles. And I was just putting this stuff out there, figuring that people would read it and they'd come to me. And they did, The dentist came to me. This guy came to me, he called me up, and he told me he was taking home $1 million a year. And I was like, what do you need me for? You're taking home $1 million a year. Why do you need more money than that? But he said to me, I heard you were smart and I read some of your stuff. And I figured that if we worked together, you'd tell me something that would help me make more money. I was like, okay, I can go with that. So, and we did. And over the course of 5 years, he ended up selling the business for more than $100 million. I mean, he's pretty major. Um, yeah, I told him I think we may be stopping working together because he had bought himself a ranch and he was spending all his time shooting wild hogs from a helicopter.
Really?
So
That's a
yeah,
recreational activity right there.
in Texas, that is a recreational activity. Wild hogs are a recreational activity. So, but the thing is, this was content marketing, and it didn't have that name. It didn't have that name then at all. It was like write articles and write books and give talks and do stuff like that. So the thing about social media is content marketing, right? I mean, that's what it is. And the the challenge now is that a lot of people have caught on to this, right?
Yep.
I mean, when I started doing this, nobody caught on to it. So it actually worked super well. I was the number one business coach on Google for a long time. And then I did something, I crossed the line with Google and they banished me. So,
Nice.
yeah, I lost a lot of money at that point. I mean, I lost a source of income that was significant. Um,
Holy.
yeah, it really sucked. But, but I had all that content out there, so I was able to survive the whole thing. But that's the biggest change in marketing from, call it 20 years ago to now. 20 years ago it was search. It was all search, and SEO was a big deal. And right now, if you look at it, SEO is largely content marketing. So,
Yeah,
more than
agreed.
anything else, SEO is content marketing.
Hmm.
If you talk to SEO experts, right, on page SEO stuff is still relevant, but it's not that relevant. I mean, it still matters, but there are many other things that you do. You have on page SEO, you have link building, and you have content marketing. And the content marketing is the thing that creates authority,
Yeah. That's so
right?
true.
Content
That's so
marketing,
true. Oh. And I
social
think that,
media is a way to become an authority.
yeah, absolutely. And that's, you're speaking my language, because it's like you go to networking events or you have these podcasts or you go places and you see folks, and it's like social media now is the glamour of, you have to have that source of proof, that social proof. Like if
True.
you go somewhere, who are you hanging out with and things like that. And I think that's what a lot of folks are looking at, because they don't look at the actual time and the energy that goes behind the content. That's one. But like the other things, they see you maybe in Florida and you're maybe hanging out with, you might see who's top on the name. Maybe you have a picture where you're side by side with LeBron James, right? Instantly, your social media credibility goes up, because now folks will be like, wait, he has a picture with LeBron. And then if LeBron reshares that, then you already know you're technically already viral, and you're probably going to get a whole bunch of people going to be now looking at your page. And I
Right.
think that's where folks get this thing, they get it kind of confused, because it's like, that's a bonus to what we do in business, content creation, podcasting, whatever, influencer, you know what I mean, TikToker, things like that. But you can't get lost in that. You know what I mean? Because now it's like,
Very much
is
so.
that is that value now that you're giving to maybe advertise your business, maybe have your coaching, mentoring, and things like that, because now you got to do real life groundwork that people can be like, okay, cool, I see what Paul's doing, I see what Rory's doing, okay, I can now relate, link in the bio, website, book a consultation, do all of that stuff. You know what I mean?
I do, and I'm kind of an anti feeling about that stuff, which is to hang out with celebrities. To me, and I know this sounds crazy, that to hang out with celebrities diminishes my value as an authority. It doesn't increase it; it diminishes it. That's just my feeling, which is that the question is like, why is this asshole hanging out with those guys? Like, what's he trying to accomplish that he's not accomplishing by actually doing the work? You know, my social proof is when you go to my success stories page and there's like 40 stories, and if I felt like it, there could be 100. And, because I've got the stories and it's just about how many am I willing to put up on the page? And if you read through those stories, you go like, oh my God, this guy really knows what he's doing, you know. And and if I look at my picture of me and LeBron James, it's like, what does it mean? Oh, it means he's like, he's hanging out with a celebrity. It's like, so what? What does that have to do with him being better? On the other hand, if I had a story where I was coaching him, that I'd be very excited about. If I'm coaching a celebrity, that really is great. If I'm just standing there and we got our arms around each other because I think he's, like I want to be in the picture with him, and he's doing it for me because he figured that that's part of his job is to do that, I'm like, yeah, what does that really contribute? How does that really amplify my story?
It's so true that you say that, because I was out. This would have been last year, and I ran into Donovan Bailey, right? Canadian sprinter, things like that. And the wild thing about it, I made the mistake because I think content. I'm always a creator, content first.
Right.
I asked him two off the wall questions. There was a picture that got posted. I know some folks that posted the picture, but it wasn't even good quality, right? It's like dark space. You got the fluorescent lighting and this and that. And the first question I asked him, I said, is, who would win in a race between you and Usain Bolt? And I said that, but I didn't capture that because I know that content right there would have shot through the roof, because people have been like, really? And the way he answered it was I love the way he answered it, because he's like,
Yeah.
it just would never be a thing. You know what I mean? There's too much respect there. And then I asked him I forget the other question I asked him, but what I'm trying to say to folks is, you got to think from the mind of content, which is business. Like you mentioned, the coaching aspect. Because now when folks are going to be like, wait, he's got the balls to ask that question to Donovan Bailey? Because, people on ESPN, not discrediting people on ESPN, reporters and things like that, they're not necessarily going to ask that question. But since from a podcast perspective, you're sitting there, you're like, okay, let me ask this guy an actually strategic question that I wish I captured on camera. But I didn't do it. But you learn for next time. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't that time, and I don't feel like it was that moment for me at that time. But now I always keep actually two phones on me at all times now, anytime I'm out. You know what I mean? One for content, the other one obviously for, phone messaging, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks don't, and I speak from a content perspective, the reason why I do that, it separates the both, right? So it's not like you have your main phone, somebody's going to be like looking at your main phone, taking the content and then whatever. No. I got my own content phone. We do the content, we do the business planning, all of that, and you make it strategic. And it's something that it's
Smart.
advantageous. Yeah. Oh, for sure. So with business now and where you're at, right? AI was never a thing. It was never a thing.
No, AI was never a thing. I always thought AI was when AI started coming back, not back, when AI started coming into the business play for like regular, ordinary business guys. I thought it was bull because I just thought of like the old AI was just like I have access to a bunch of data and I can look through the data and figure stuff out, you know. And I didn't think it was going to be that great, but now I cut you off. So ask your question.
No. It's all good, because I think AI now is it's a
I love
super
it.
yeah,
I
it's a
use it
super
daily.
yeah, it's a superpower. Like, it's a superpower when it's in its right hands, but I think majority of folks that don't know how to use it are scared of it. But now for business, how do you feel AI is going to change the landscape of business? Because it's already changing the landscape for content creation. But now let's speak to business and coaching.
So I'm definitely not an AI expert in terms of my understanding of how it works from a technological perspective. My background is software development.
Interesting.
So yeah, I went to art school, and then I got out of art school and I was like, I didn't want to be a starving artist. And I ended up being a software designer. And I built two software companies. I sold software to international banks and did that for 10 years and then decided to move on. But I use AI for content creation. It's like a Swiss Army knife for content creation. It's like use it for brainstorming, use it for creating outlines, use it to expand the outlines, use it to do whatever you have to do with, use it to create scripts, use it. I mean, like I use it for everything, and I will try. It doesn't work for everything, but I try to use it for everything. Say, oh, let's see if ChatGPT can do this. I was having ChatGPT talk to me about spirit animals the other day.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wear a lot of jewelry. I'm not wearing. I wear a lot of jewelry that represents my spirit animals,
Okay.
and so I was going somewhere and I was walking in the street, and I said, ChatGPT. I said, tell me about the characteristics of a dragon as a spirit animal. And as I'm walking along, it's telling me this whole thing. So it was great. But but so that's a really good use of ChatGPT for anything like that. Tell me about this. Give me information about this particular thing, and I use it for that all the time. And what I found out is that ChatGPT on my phone is great at talking to me. And I've had conversations. I had a whole conversation with it 2 days ago about Mexican slang. I told you I live in Mexico,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of very colorful slang, and and I was having a conversation with ChatGPT about what the various words mean. Like, if I want to know, like, what that means in Spanish, or in Mexican slang, tell me what it is. It's like chingon. What does chingon mean? Chingon, like my understanding of chingon is it means badass. And it can also mean awesome. And it turns out somebody told me that there's like a whole dictionary devoted to the different meanings of the word chingon, and
Huh.
depending upon how you pronounce it,
Okay.
because it basically means awesome. But I bought a jaguar's tooth from a guy in Oaxaca, and he says to me, "Chingon." I was like, "What's that mean?" And he says, "It means badass." I was like, "Oh, cool, I want it."
Yeah, well, listen, not all of us can wear a jaguar tooth around the neck, right? So
Right, I can
I
because it's one of my prey animals.
love that. I love that.
But it's like, I'm looking for the meaning of a word, or I'm looking for a thesaurus, synonyms and stuff. I use ChatGPT for that. But all right, so in terms of business, if you think that here's a tool that can amplify your ability to analyze anything, right? We can use it to analyze ourselves as human beings, rather to amplify our ability to analyze things as human beings, and we can automate it all because it's all programmable and we can automate all of it. So if you just think about it from that, that's like a really broad perspective, but that's where this thing's going. That anything that we need to look at. So it's like if you're a trader and you're not using AI, you got to be crazy. If you're a writer and you're not using AI, you got to be crazy. If you're a researcher and you're not using AI to do your research for you, like, why wouldn't you do that? Any single thing, I mean, this is really silly, but any single thing that you would hire an assistant to do, AI will do for you. And I've gone through, of the number of assistants that I've gone through over the years, it's very rare that you find somebody who's like an assistant level job who can actually do thorough analysis and come up with unique ideas. Mostly they do what's typical and trivial and obvious. That's what your basic assistant's going to do. AI is not going to do that. AI does not start with the obvious. AI does deep level analysis. And so the simplest thing to do as like an entrepreneur who's listening to this podcast, any single thing that you would ask an assistant to do, AI is probably going to do better.
So true. So true. And there's a lot of big creators that have come on this platform. Speaking to like Nikki Saunders, and you hear where she says, "I use AI for parts of the scripting and the formulating and regulating and things like that." Because sometimes there's things you gotta write that sometimes we may not catch the proper verbiage of how to do it. Like you have Grammarly, and I'll be honest, Grammarly kind of was a part of the start and kicking part off of AI. because it automates and it
Hey,
corrects what the
Grammarly's great.
you know what I mean? Grammarly, if you don't use, like, I'll speak to this, the students out there, if you're not having Grammarly on your MacBook, like, I don't know what you're doing. You know what I mean? But I think what folks do is they look at AI and they think, oh, I can say this is this and spit it out. And I'll just copy and paste. You can't do that because that's where now you cheat in the system and you're cheating yourself.
You know what? I think I get lucky sometimes, which is if I tell it pretty clearly what I want, say I wanted to write an article about XYZ, and here are 7 bullet points I want it to cover. Right? If I do that, it gives me something like ready, finished copy. And I'm getting it to where I'm trained it in my voice. I've written 3 books. I call it feeding the AI. I have fed the AI my books. I have fed the AI my Facebook. You know, you can download everything you've put on Facebook. And if you download all your posts from Facebook, you feed those to the AI. And you feed the AI your emails. And you feed the AI everything you can. And the AI starts to write in your voice. And it gets closer. I'm finding it's getting closer and closer to sounding like me. And there are times I don't have to do any rewriting, which is really fairly amazing. You know, the other thing is people are still trying to get the AI to do what they want with one big prompt. And if instead what they do is an iterative prompt, they get much better work. So you may not actually have to edit the thing, but you may have to tell it to rewrite it in a certain way. You
So
know,
it doesn't sound
when
robotic,
AI
yeah.
remember when AI popped into our thinking, and the schools were getting all stressed out about, oh, how do we tell if it's AI or not? You know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, let's fast forward a little bit. Those people shouldn't care because that becomes part of the tool set. And I don't care. People can't think I'm using AI. I'm okay about that. This whole idea that we're supposed to label posts AI, I'm a photographer and I make art photography. And my stuff is heavily, heavily post processed. I don't take a picture and post it. I don't take a picture and print it. I take a picture and work on it until it's done. And then when it's done, I can post it, I can print it, I can do whatever I want with it. But why should the viewer care whether I used AI or not? Why should they care? What does that mean? I'm looking at a piece of art. Why do I care how it was created? You know, it's like people used to ask us, I haven't heard this question in a while. People used to ask, what kind of camera did you use? And I'm like, would you think that that's going to give you pictures that look like mine because of if you use my camera? People always used to, but people ask, they want to know what kind of filter. Now, what kind of filter seems to be changed with, are you using AI? But they want to know what kind of filter. And I'd say, well, I said, I could tell you what kind of filters I used, but I've been doing this since I was 6 years old. I said, do you think that the filters are going to help your pictures look like mine? And they're not. I've been composing photographs since I was 6 years old. I have proof of this. I found a picture of myself when I was 6 carrying around a little box camera. And I'm like, okay, there's the proof that I've been doing this that long, right?
No,
But
I love that.
what
That's the thing.
tool you're using doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that's the thing that folks don't understand, especially even in podcasting, right? Like, the sky's the limit. Like, so many folks think you need to go out and you need to get the high tech cameras to do the multicam sequence. I get it. That looks good because if you're doing behind the scenes stuff, and I actually had a conversation about this last night. If you're doing the behind the scenes stuff, like you're doing the panorama for Instagram, things like that, showing behind the
Right.
scenes, not many folks are going to want to see an iPhone camera on a tripod because then they're going to be like, oh, that person's cheap. Well, believe it or not, I'm going to tell people this: the technology that's built in the iPhones, and especially now, anything that's 13, 14, 15 onward, you put two of those cameras up and you tripod them. I'm giving so much sauce right now. You right now have your podcasting set up on your cameras. Saves you money at the end of the day. Heck, go through your local provider and add another phone onto your account. You have your main phone that you use, but you have your other phone that you use. And then you know what? You drag and drop it to the cloud and then you're good to go. You know what I mean? So
That's cool.
yeah, and I think a lot of folks don't realize like the power of the iPhones now, like iPhone 16 Pro Max. They're coming out with the AI right now. It's in beta. There's some restrictions, but it's gonna fully start coming out. That's gonna be a content creator's dream. Like
Wow.
people don't understand the way that phones are shaped right now. That's our new that's been our portable computer. You can do your invoices. You can take your meetings on your phone. You know how many folks listen from sports to this and that. What do you see people doing on interviews now? They're calling in from their phone because the phone has the quality to do it. You know what I mean? So it's
Yes, I
like
do.
some folks look at their phone and they're scared of the damn thing. They don't want to communicate with the damn thing. And I'm like, you have so many things at your disposal. FaceTime it up, record it up, you know what I mean? Things like that. But hey, what do we know?
Yeah. I mean, I I have a 15 Pro Max. And now I'm like, the only reason I bought it, my last phone was fine. There was nothing wrong with it. It's just I wanted the better camera. There's a saying, people say, what's the best camera? And the answer is the best camera is the camera you have with you. And I shoot with the Sony, and that's how I take my pictures when I'm carrying my Sony. But if I'm not carrying the Sony, I'm carrying my 15 Pro Max. And it's like, it's not as good, but it's pretty damn good. You know, it's definitely not, it does not have the, I shoot a lot of fireworks pictures. The town I live in has an insane amount of fireworks. And this town was once chastised by the federal government for having too many celebrations. And I don't know why that was, but it's a ridiculous thing to hear. But I take fireworks pictures, and there's technique to taking fireworks pictures and getting them good. And you can't do it on an iPhone. You just can't do it on an iPhone yet.
Yeah,
You know,
it's coming.
maybe soon. Maybe
It's
soon.
coming. It's coming. And that's the thing, like, I was in a conversation with one of my friends. He's like, best invoice system. And I'm like telling folks, even like I have the 16 Pro, right? And Pro Max, and I said is that thing now is like it's its own iPad now. And so like when you're doing invoices or you're doing anything, right? Instead of banging it out on your computer and your Mac or Mac Mini or whatever you're using, it's so much easier just to do it from the phone. And I'm a voice automation
Really
guy now too, right?
interesting.
You know what I mean? I'm a voice automation guy too. So it's like you're writing in an email or you're sending in that voice note or you're doing like the voice to text feature, add commas, add your periods, add this. Sometimes it's so much faster. You know what I mean? And that's what I say is productivity is a thing. And this is gonna lead into my next question. It's like, how do we amplify that productivity as entrepreneurs, as content creators in this world where we're like, it's like the walls are caving in on us. So much distractions. So what would you say? What comes up to mind?
Yeah, I don't think the issue is a technological issue. I think all entrepreneurs have some level of ADD. They just, it's just, and we say that because it's that level of distraction and the number of things that are there to take you away from what you're trying to focus on, and so on and so forth. It's like the real thing is to get a grip on yourself so that it's, this whole question about productivity. The issue, I think the simplest answer is stop doing stupid stuff, right? I teach that in the course I do. Right? And I say it, and I say, okay, this is the most important thing you're going to hear me say today. Stop doing stupid stuff. And they all crack up because people know they're doing stupid stuff. If you stop doing stupid stuff, then what's left is you doing smart stuff. And that's the increase in productivity that you're getting. So then the question is just simply, what's the best tool for me? You know, so you just dislike my laptop. And I love my laptop, right? I love my laptop. I'm a touch typist. I've been a touch typist for 20 years or more, 30 years. You know, my hands taught themselves how to type. One day, we had sold our company, and the guys, and they got rid of all our secretaries at one point, which was ridiculous. You know, pay a lot of money for a company, you should keep the secretaries. But they got rid of our secretaries. So I'm typing myself, and I'm typing there, and I'm looking at this thing, and all of a sudden I realized that I'm not looking at what I'm typing. So I'm just typing away. And it's like, who taught my hands to type? How'd they learn how to type? You know, so I like a laptop because I can touch type it if I'm typing letters or typing articles or if I'm typing a book or whatever it is. This works way better than doing it on a phone, right? So phone is good for a lot of stuff, but it's not good for creating long form word based content.
No,
You
absolutely.
know,
Because you got to turn it
it's just
landscape. You got to turn it landscape. Like my biggest pet
yeah, and
peeve.
my thumbs. I'm a pretty good thumb typist on my phone, but that is nowhere near what I'm capable of as like typing on a real keyboard. All right,
One of
so
my
big deal.
pet peeves, one of my biggest pet peeves with phones is when folks take their iPhone and instead of texting this way, they turn it landscape and then they're texting. I'm like, why do you have like a video game controller in your hand? It's funny. I see it and I laugh all the
Right.
time. And you see them like this punching it, and I'm like, do you not get the same defect like when you turn it this way? I feel like
That's pretty
if you're
funny.
looking dead on, you're good because now you have a bigger keyboard. So you're like, what are you doing? You trying to input the coding to make Sonic move? Like, what we doing?
That's
You know what I
pretty
mean?
funny.
But
That's
here's my
funny.
thing is, right, with the time that we have here in the space and great conversation is, we see entrepreneurs, we see business owners, and they have these bottlenecks that come up. Here's these bottlenecks, they're continuous, they happen. Speak to the bottlenecks. And how can we eliminate those distractions as bottlenecks to actually improve what it is we're doing?
I think to recognize that we're wired that way. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You know, it's like you have to make, I call it stop doing stupid stuff for a reason, because it's easy to figure out which are the things that contribute and which are the things which don't. You know, the simple thing that every entrepreneur needs to do is gain clarity on what has to get done, right? And people don't have that clarity unless they put the time into thinking about it. But once you figure out, well, what does my business consist of? I got to be able to get people to talk to, you know, right? That's my marketing. I have to find people to talk to. And then I have to be able to talk to them. There's my sales, and I have to get good at doing that. And I've decided I want to create content because that my marketing is going to be sourced from the content I'm creating. And then, well, what do I have to deliver? What's my product or what's my service? You know, if I'm a coach, then I don't need to create a lot of stuff. But if I'm a course creator, okay, I'm working on that now. I'm actually in the search for what my next big product's going to be. And it's actually, I'm relating that to what we're talking about here, which is that it's like once I figure out what are all the key things which make my business work, then the question is what I'm doing related to that, or is it something else entirely? You know, I always used to I ask audiences, you know, what are your guilty pleasures? Like, what are the things you work on that you know are silly to work on? You know, somebody raises their hand, they say, I like to order supplies. I'm like, wow, you know. Yeah, I asked for the truth. You gave me the truth. But it's
Right.
like, you know, it's top down. And you start at the top, which is what does my business need? What are the key things in my business that have to move forward? And then I evaluate whether or not the time I'm spending is moving that forward, or whether it's some other garbage. So the whole thing about productivity is not about how you be productive, but it's more about are you doing things which make a difference, right? It's not like How do I get better at writing articles? I don't know how you get better at writing articles. I've been doing it my whole life. I finally figured out how to do it. I don't have any shortcuts for it. But I do have a shortcut that says I need to write an article X amount of times a week. And if I'm not allocating the time to do that, then I'm not going to get where I needed to go. Right. So it's not so much about the how as the what. And if you focus on the what, you'll get more motion forward than if you focus on the how do I push this thing forward. Right? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Before we get out of here, because I feel like it's a question that a lot of folks answer differently when it comes down to business or success or building a brand and things like that. Speak to a time you had to overcome adversity, and what did you have to do to rectify that adversity to make the success become what it needed to be?
I'll tell you, this really crosses my mind because it was such a big thing. I had a girlfriend who died,
Okay.
and who died suddenly.
Okay.
And her dying suddenly completely crashed my business because all my attention went to that.
Yep. And that's
All
normal.
my
It's gonna happen with everyone.
It's going to happen with everyone. And, you find yourself in grief. It's really hard to get any work done. So I was in this place where I was deeply unhappy. I was, this was somebody I was in love with. This is someone I lived with. And I was deeply unhappy. And I literally was like, my work was grinding to a halt. It just, I stopped doing this stuff. And I'm kind of giving you the same answer I just gave you about productivity, which is what it takes. So when most, and I know this is true for men, I don't know if this is true for women. When they get into grief, what they do is they throw themselves into their work. They just throw themselves. That's how they escape grief. They throw themselves into their work. But the thing is, you don't necessarily do good work at that point because you're kind of crashing and burning in the middle. So the big thing for me, again, it's not the how, it's the what. I want to be really clear on where I'm trying to go with my life at this moment. Like, what am I trying to make happen here at this moment? And I feel like that's always the way to, as you put it, overcome adversity, is to take a look at the direction you're going in. And for me, it was to see the direction I was going to go in my life. And I decided to do the opposite. I went counterintuitive. I took myself out of my work. And I really walked forward into my feelings. And I just embraced them as deeply as I could. And that is what allowed me to get back into my business and to do it in a valuable way, in like a constructive way, where I was like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. This is where it's taking me. And now what I want to do is this. I think this is true for so many things, which is that people try to solve problems and they try to solve, it's kind of like, oh, I got another phone that'll solve my problems. Get another phone won't solve your fucking problems. I went on a podcast, I'm swearing, but
Oh, good. Don't worry about it. It's all good. A little curse word never hurt nobody.
It never hurt nobody, but it's like, what is it I'm really trying to do here? That question, to me, is the number one question one needs to keep in mind, and it helps fix a lot of problems. What is it I'm really trying to do here? And when you get clear on that, you can bring yourself around to actually doing the thing. And it's not a technological solution. It's not a like, oh, go read this book, it'll fix you kind of solution. It's like, let me get clear on who I'm trying to be in the moment.
Absolutely.
And that clarity helps almost everything.
Absolutely. You speak to that, and I want folks to understand it's okay to feel. We're not all these Marvel, DC superheroes in life. There's times that we're going to have stuff happen. Like if you're a forward thinking person, you know that there's life and you know that there's death, right? So I'm speaking to, it could be a loss of a loved one, a parent, a family member, a coworker, and it can derail you a little bit. But sometimes you just got to sit in that. The other
Or
night I
derail
was,
you a lot,
yeah,
or a
yeah,
lot.
oh,
And if you can ground yourself in that one question, which is, what am I really trying to do here? If you
facts.
can ground yourself in that question, that will lead you to a lot of different kinds of solutions.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's tough. I was actually speaking about this in a with a group of people, whereas like I remember it was back around when I was 25, 26, and I basically it was a rough time. Lost my best friend, right, and I went 3 months rogue. I rogued for, you know what I mean? And folks were hitting me up. This was the days of like Blackberry, things like that. And they're like, yo, man, like, you good? Blah, 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 blah. You all right? Is everything okay? And I respond back, yo, come on, whatever. Wasn't having it. I needed to
Right.
take those 3 months. And you know something, Paul? I think with this show now, I give tidbits of like what overcoming adversity is. But I say to folks is, it was that time I was at LA Fitness, and I remember I was on the back rowing machine, and it was when Fast and Furious came out and Paul Walker passed away, and there was that song, and I sat there and it hit me dead straight in the mouth, and I had to cry. I start crying
Yeah.
in the gym, but that's when I made that acceptance in myself, and I said, "Yo, it's okay to feel, ladies and gentlemen. It's okay to feel." And when you can
Yeah.
feel, that's how you process. And when you process, that's how you start overcoming it. And when you overcome it, that's when you know at that moment of that day or that evening, whatever it's going to be, you pick yourself back up and you say, you know what? I can get
Yeah.
through this. I can
You
get
can
through
move on.
this. Yeah,
Yeah, really. What you just said is it's kind of a funny thing because as you know, as boys, we're taught not to cry.
facts.
You know, I never cried about stuff, and then after my girlfriend died, I started to cry. And it was like I cried a lot during that period of time. You know, I'd be walking down the street thinking that's to me, I always thought grief meant you were very sad. Grief doesn't mean you're very sad. Grief means you're completely out of control sad. And I'd be walking down the street thinking everything was fine. And then all of a sudden I'd just start crying about something. And it'd be like, oh man, you know? And what I found was, and this may sound strange to people, but your ability to cry is a really good thing. It's a good thing. It opens you up in a way that other parts of being alive don't. And so I found that it's like it's shocking to me because it still happens. I mean, this is now 11, 12 years later. And it's like I cry in movies. It's like,
I
but
think
I
we've all
actually
had that. We all have that, of course.
I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for us.
Yeah,
As guys, we've been taught to stay away from that. And it's actually, it gives us access to parts of ourselves. It gives me access to part of myself I didn't have access to before.
exactly. And then here's what I'll say is, just to even add on to that as we're closing out, be around the mindsets, because I think this can go through a whole other show. I think when we feel vulnerable, I've always said is feel vulnerable around your men groups, because we'll
Yes,
understand what that feels like. Because there's been times where growing up, early 20s, you may be dating somebody, something happens, you cry or you're emotional, you're upset, and I'm not trying to throw shade here, but a lot of women don't know how to deal with that because I don't think they're subjected to it.
they
So
don't.
when they see it, it's like, ooh, okay, well, what's this about? You know what I
Yeah, we're
mean?
not sure what to do with
They're
this.
not they're not sure to do with it. But guys, like, I listen. There's been times you're with your boys on the phone and you're having you're crying or you're doing this, And you know what? You can relate and you can understand because it's like, okay, cool, man, let it out. Let it out. We can't bottle up our time. We can't bottle that stuff up. Like, when Kobe passed away, I was on a whole podcast in shambles. It's wild
Uh-oh.
because I was like, I'm sitting there recording, and it was with friend at the time, and I was crying. I'm like, it's not because how do I say this? It's not because I didn't respect Kobe, but it was like he's a part of our fucking childhood. We
Right,
watched
right,
Jordan, we watched Kobe. Now we're watching LeBron. So I know that
right.
there's folks that, God forbid, we're not all promised tomorrow. When that shit happens, there's gonna be a lot of these younger generation that look at LeBron and they're gonna be in shambles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what
I
I'm
do.
trying to say to folks is like, listen, it's okay to let that side of you out. You know what I mean? And I think we live in this world now where we need to get back to that clarity of what, I don't want to say authenticity because I think they played that word out in the pandemic. But
It's
it's
the
like,
full range of emotions,
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
you
Feel
know?
those
And
emotions and it's okay.
we have all been taught that those were not okay. And I think it's coming around that they are.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I'm going to say this, and if there's women listening, I'm apologizing ahead of time, which is that I think that women have they say they want men to have emotions, but when the men show those emotions, they have no idea what to do with them. And so I think there's healing on both sides that needs to occur, and that it'll all work out over time. But at the moment, it's like they just don't know what to do with it. So it's like you save those emotions for your guys, and
Yeah,
it's going to be
it's
very
true.
powerful.
It's so true. It's so true. And that's okay. Like, I think if it's like life or death, like your girls or, your wife or whatever, like God forbid, it's a passing of a loved one, they'll understand that. They'll understand that. Because you have some guys in the community podcast space, you're not supposed to cry even for that. And it's like, what? Wait, what? Hold on. Like, that's a ooh, like hard. Like, what happened to you in life? Like, you know what I mean? Like, if
Yes,
it's a birth, because I don't have any kids, but I've heard guys say like, listen, they tear up, they see they're born, they're like, yo, that's my baby now. It's game, you know what I mean? It's game on,
the
it's
minute
like,
my
oh
daughter
shit,
was born, I was actually like, I was feeling things that I didn't even know I had. I had no idea.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny.
it's one
I
of the
think
best
about
things that came out of having kids was like it was like extra access to your feelings.
I love it, man. Paul, I appreciate this podcast. I appreciate you.
Yeah,
And
likewise.
I would love to have even a deeper conversation, maybe off the cusp of business and just what it is it like being a man now, because like where you're at in age and where I'm at in age, I'm 40. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
it's like, let's have these conversations. I think from where I see how life and what manhood is now, it's it's messed up a little bit. It's messed up a little bit. And I think now for where you're at, you've seen the plethora of like the whole plight now. You know what I mean? So it's like I feel like we need to go back to that old school mentality with some stuff when the dating and relationships and stuff like that versus what this new age phenomenon is, because there's a whole bunch of this jadedness that's going on.
Well, I'd be happy to have that conversation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll schedule that in the back end, the back channel, and definitely set that
Sounds
up, my
good.
friend. But
Sounds
by
good.
all means, plug all your information, my friend. I appreciate you. Instagram, what you got coming up? This is your opportunity.
Real simply, my website, which is a good place to start for me, is Lemberg.com. If you look on the screen, that's the spelling of my name. Um, Lemberg.com. That domain is so old, people have been trying to buy it for decades.
You're not trying to sell it?
I am not trying to sell it. No,
No money in the
no.
world will no money in the world will
Oh
stop you.
no, the right amount of money, I'd sell it, but
You never know.
pay me enough money that I don't need it anymore.
Oh, geez, that's so he's saying there's a few zeros you got to put on that.
You got to
Send it
put a
his way,
few
right?
zeros on it. Yeah. So that's like a really good place to find me. And I'm working on a new project, which is, if you're interested in it, I'd love to hear about it. I'm working on a project that combines business growth, revenue and profit growth with what I call practical magic, which is really magic, but I stick the word practical on there to make it sound less scary. Um, I'm a bit of a magician and an alchemist myself, and I'm bringing that material into entrepreneurship because I think it's very powerful. And I'd be real interested in hearing from people who are interested in that. We're bringing out a program probably within the next 6 months
Okay.
that's going to be dealing with that.
Okay.
And that's pretty exciting.
Oh well, hey, listen, I'll tell folks this. Like, one of my last podcasts I recorded, by the time that this comes out, it's already gonna be out. I said is we need to start celebrating and championing the people that are not these focal point celebrities. I know that I get it. We get enamored by the Tom Brady's of the world or the Patrick Mahomes of the world, but there's folks in our community that are doing doing some powerful things. So pay attention to that. Really, just lock into that. Pay attention to that. It's free 99 to do a share. It's free 99 to go on that person's website. Throw that follow. Heck, if they don't follow you back, fucking who cares? But you know what?
Okay.
Look at what's going on and just have those, words of encouragement and build community because it's the most important thing. Everyone that has come on this podcast, there's been some that obviously we don't talk because it's just whatever. But then I look at the ones that I make those connections with that I know that's an email away or they still like an Instagram post or even heck, hey, I'm in your city. I'm coming to Canada. I'm coming to Toronto. What's going on? What's new? What's exciting? What's the fun spots? Hey, listen, let me look at my schedule. Yo, we can meet up. You want to grab a drink? You want to grab a coffee? That's community. That's collaboration. And I appreciate the hell out of you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Man, always, always. We gonna do it again. Trust me.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Appreciate you.